Hi, this is Walter Weesey with Yellowstone Country Fly Fishing and Parks Fly Shop with my first weekly fly tying video of the sort of winter fly tying season here. This is, I think it's roughly October 7th or November 7th here. I kind of been paying attention to the election here and I've just kind of lost my mind. But this is a woolly bugger and girdle bug crossover pattern called a TJ hooker. And the TJ hooker in particular is tied here on a jig hook with a bead. This is the version I've mostly fished. I've seen very, very similar patterns this year called girdle buggers, for obvious reasons. I've also seen these called bugger legs. But, there's a lot of flies that have just kind of come out this season that are kind of like this. And it's sort of the same purpose as the zertle bug I put a video out of last season, and that's to be sort of a crossover streamer stonefly nymph. And this, I actually found the first one of these I ever found was actually hanging underneath a big chubby Chernobyl that I found in a tree on the Boulder River, river east of here that I've started floating a lot. And I just looked at it and said, you know what, that'll work great. And the real advantage of this fly, there's a couple things. Number one, this is a size 12 hook here, which it's a fairly big size 12. It's really more like a size 10. But, that's really small for a stonefly nymph here. But really, the stonefly nymph portion, when it's on a dead drift, goes all the way to the end of the tail here. So in actuality, this is more like a size 6 or size 4 stonefly nymph. But then that's when it's on a dead drift. But then once you start dragging it, it turns into, an 1.5 inch long sculpin pattern. And so whether you drag it on purpose or inadvertently, you've got kind of two things going on there. And particularly rough water, like on the Boulder, for example, when I'm rowing it, the reason I was immediately taken by this fly is I'm dodging rocks constantly. And so I'm not holding the boat a constant distance away from the rocks. I'm moving the boat constantly. And so I'm dragging the boat as a guide. I'm moving the boat back and forth as a guide. And, obviously people are going to be casting, but there's always going to be some drag in there. And so fishing this as a dropper underneath a big chubby Chernobyl, a big hopper, something like that, it's imitative whether you're on a dead drift or if you're dragging. Now, the other thing that this worked great for me for is this fall, and this is why I'm doing this right now, super pattern fishing up in Yellowstone Park, both for fall run browns and for, the resident fish that are sitting there eating their eggs. This one I tied with an orange bead specifically for the fall fishing, but the black beaded one worked fine too. And I think, again, I was kind of Euro nymphing with it. I've really taken to mostly Euro nymphing in the fall because I'm not really targeting the big browns. If I get one, great, but I'm just fishing for numbers. And on the Gardner River in particular, that's a great way of catching a lot of fish is to Euro nymph it. And, again, put it right in that little pocket, and once you get to the bottom of the pocket, let it swing out, and sometimes you get one on the drag. But, good basic attractor nymph can be a lot of things. It could also be a crayfish, I think. It's not that different from a lot of crayfish patterns. And worked really, in fact, this was definitely my best fly in the month of October this year. And, those of you in warmer climates will have a couple weeks where if you tie a few of these right now, you'll have some good fall fishing on this right now. Okay, so my hook here is a Kumoto KJ2322 60-degree jig hook in size 12 with a barb on it. And this hook does run a little big. This is more like a size 10 in a lot of other hook brands. The notice here that it has a barb, and the reason for that, I don't use barbs when I'm actually fishing, but I like having the barb there so that when I smash it, I still have that bump there. And so when I tie on a dropper, behind the hook, I actually still have something to keep that dropper from sliding off. And so anything I'm going to be using as my sort of weight fly, I like to have a barb on there because, if I tie my dropper directly to the hook, that way it doesn't slide off as easily. And then I do want to show you here an additional hook, and this is called a Maruto 5350, and there's other ones here, but what that is a 90-degree jig hook with a barb. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because if you still want to have that jig action with a lighter bead or no bead at all, you can tie that with that a hook like that, you know, it's a slightly long shank, sort of a, I would call it like a crappie jig hook. You could tie it on that hook, and or you know, Komodo's coming out with one like that. There's a few other ones. I've got some Daiichis that are a little bigger sitting here. This being a fly that I would fish, you know, this one I'm tying today, I would fish primarily as a Euro nymph or, you know, under an indicator. But this is also a good pattern to fish under a great big hopper, you know. But the smaller you go on your hopper, obviously, the smaller you have to go on your nymph, and the lighter you have to go on your nymph. And, you know, you could use a brass bead or no bead at all, and that will allow you to fish a slightly larger nymph, you know, under the same size hopper. Anyway, I've got, probably 10 or 12 turns of 0.015 lead wire here. I don't ever measure how many turns I make. I just, you know, line it up on the shank how far I want it, and I want it basically right down to the tip of the point, the hook point there. And then the bead here is a 5/32 inch, that's better. I just turned off one of my lights. Anyway, the bead's a 5/32 inch orange slotted tongue. And now the stock bead on this fly would be black or gold, you know, your normal beads. But this is being a fall pattern. I like having something a little bit eggy on there. And so, anyway, I'm going to start my thread here, which is just basic brown 6/0. You're not going to see it anyway. I'm going to start that right behind the wire there, and then go over that wire. I like to do both here, you know, X-wrap that wire in like I'm doing, and then also build up a dam behind it so that you have something wedging it forward into the bead. And then I'm going to go ahead and super glue that as well, just for some extra protection. Now my tail on this fly is tan-dyed brown barred marabou, and you could use chickaboo, you know, you could use anything, but this is MFC's barred, they call it buggerboo, and it's a kind of a fine barred, you know, smaller barring for smaller flies. And so I'm going to go ahead and tie that in. And I like the tail a little shorter. You know, if I was tying a woolly bugger, I'd probably want the tail, you know, something like that. I like a pretty long tail on my woolly bugger. But given that this is kind of a nymph as well, I'm going to tie that more like slightly shorter than shank length, so about like that. And just come in here, and I like to tie that in right at the back of the body there. And then I'm going to go back, and then I'm also going to go forward with it. And what I like to do there is just go forward with the thread and then bind it down. I find that's usually a little cleaner when I do it that way. And then go back to the rear of the hook there. You know, and if you really wanted to push the sculpin aspect of this fly, you could tie in some flash right now, etc. But I'm not really too worried about that, and so, you know, I fish this more as a nymph, I think. My body on this fly is going to be, well, unreadable because of my light, but it's Cascade Crest New Age Chenille in Henry's Lake, which I've used before. This is my favorite color of the chenille for tying stonefly nymphs. My first video I've shot in a while, and so I'm maybe a little rusty here. Anyway, this is size 0 on this small of a fly with the underbody. If I was tying it without the lead underbody, I would use size 1, and anything larger I'd use size 1, you know, period. Anything smaller I'd probably use size 0, period. So clean that up, go ahead and tie that in, clean that up. And then I've got, for my legs on this fly, I've got size small Montana Fly Company Sexy Floss in copper brown. And again, anything bigger than this, I'd probably use the medium size. And then what I like to do here is I've got 3 legs here, because there's going to be 3 legs, of course, on the fly. And I like to get the length, you know, where I want it there, cut those, and then set all 3 of the you know, remaining long sections aside. And that way I've got 3 legs that are approximately the same length here, rather than, you know, having to trim aggressively later on. So I'm going to tie in that first leg here, you know, roughly even with the front of the hook point. And I like the legs to angle back, you know, in the back, and then forward in the, at the front end. And so I'm going to kind of tie that in, hopefully getting it so that there's a slight backwards angle in terms of how those are tied in. Certainly no forward angle on those. Let's make a couple turns forward there. Grab one of my other legs, And this one I ideally don't want to be off center at all here, you know, just kind of be square. And I mean, it doesn't matter because these are going to flip-flop in the water anyway. Now, if you're going to be tying this any smaller, I would recommend just tying in 2 legs. In fact, you could probably get away with 2 legs, even on this size. And then finally, do my last leg here, kind of right up. Leave a little bit of room. You want to make have room for 1 turn of that chenille, roughly, as well as the head of the fly. Behind that bead, so just kind of right there at the front. And like I said, I'd like, if possible, to have a little bit of forward angle there on that last set of legs. And before I wrap the chenille forward, I'm going to come in here with some head cement, and this is one case where I don't use super glue because super glue will not be friendly towards these spandex legs, or rubber legs for that matter. And I just put a little bit of head cement right on those wraps securing that. I'm going to drop my bobbin cradle, and then just, you notice I don't even, I never trim my chenille as long as I'm using, you know, I don't have a full skein of it or something. And so that way there's very little waste, and so I'm just going to grab that ball of chenille, hold it, and then rotate. And I didn't quite leave enough room there at the front for that additional turn of head, or turn of chenille there right at the front of the fly, and so I'm just going to tie that off. I sort of made that half turn up underneath the hook shank, and that's kind of at the end of my chenille. I'm going to actually tie off that brown thread, and on this one of the ways I kind of differentiate my weighted flies from my other ones is, you know, you can do it however you want with different color thread head. And even if I didn't put the extra weight under this, I'd still be using this fluorescent fire orange thread for the head, just because it's kind of a hot spot with that bead. Like I said, I'm going for kind of a eggy sort of head on this fly. But what I got here is some brownstone SLF dubbing, and this is actually how I differentiate my weighted flies, is I'll just use a little dubbing or something like that to kind of show that it's a different fly. Because, you know, when this is in my box, I'll put this in the box with, you know, the ones that are unweighted except for the bead, but then I can see that little patch of dubbing right there, and that'll tell me okay, that's a heavy one. And then what I like to do here is just to make sure that A, that head holds together, and then B, so that hot spot is a little brighter, is I made 3 really kind of large whip finishes there, and so that thread band will be really prominent. And then even so, I'm going to come in here and then with my super glue, and you notice there's a little bit of a hole there where the slotted bead is. I'm going to try to get as much of that head cement right into that hole as I can, super glue rather than head cement, and then I'll go around it. But if I can get some of that into that hole, I feel like that's going to secure it from both sides. And so that I've caught as many as 40 fish on one of these flies. So there you go. There is a completed TJ hooker. Really good kind of girdle bug, woolly bugger crossover pattern, and really, really effective for me this fall. And you still got some time to fish it this fall, and I'm sure it'll fish well next year too. As always, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll be getting out more of these videos, you know, on a weekly basis this winter.